Hello, students. Good afternoon. Today we'll discuss about Thomas Hardy. He's a famous English novelist and poet. Thomas Hardy is very renowned English novelist and poet from Victorian era, right? You know that English, if we see the history of English literature, so that there are different eras and Thomas Hardy is from Victorian era, right? So we'll see that what's his life. His works are known for their bleak outlook, exploration of social constraints, and tragic circumstances. Right? So his works for bleak outlook, exploration of social constraints, and tragic circumstances faced by his characters, often set in the fictional rural region which is created by Thomas Hardy Wessex, like Arkin created Malgudi. Malgudi by Arkin and Wessex by Thomas Hardy, right? So this the basic thing we got to know about him. Now some biological facts we are going to discuss here. Thomas Hardy was born in 1840, right? In a rural Dorset, England, rural England, he was born. And Hardy was the son of stonemason, right? So he was the son of stonemason, and his formal education was limited, of course, because resources were not there, right? So his formal education was limited and ending at 16 when he was apprenticed to a local architect. So here it at the age of 16 he has to stop study. He later moved to London to work in a prominent architectural firm. He worked in an architectural firm, a profession he practiced for over a decade. So 10 years around he worked in an architectural firm. Then literary career, if we talk about his literary career, that is very important. Hardy's literary career was initially difficult, with his first novel being unsuccessful or rejected, right? So here we can even we can motivate ourselves. That's a anything. It is not always that each and everything is like what you do that will be supported by others. Sometimes it is rejected. In his life, his first novel was unsuccessful and rejected. Then his breakthrough came with Far From the Madding Crowd, right? So that's a interesting title also. That's a novel uh, it's a successful novel. Sorry, Far From the Madding Crowd. Far From the Madding Crowd, right? In 1874, right? So now that's a 1874. which allowed him to quit architecture and focus on writing full time. Because still that during his writing, first writing, far from the madding crowd, he was attached in the architectural firm. But then as he has got success in this novel, then he decided to leave the job and full time he has to focus on writing work. He went on to write other classics like The Mayor of Casterbridge, Tess of Debarable Bills, and Judge the Obscure. These are the famous works of Thomas Hardy. Then shift to poetry. The public outrage and harsh criticism directed at his final novel, Jude the Obscure. It was highly criticized, which explored controversial themes of sexuality and religion. Because of this, that's a controversial theme and religion in this work, Jude the Obscure. So then led Hardy to abandon novel writing entirely in 1895. So he was aloof, and for the rest of his life he focused on his first love, poetry. So, because he was very much criticized for Jude the Obscure, which was actually controversial theme was that's a sexuality and religion, and that is why Hardy he led Hardy was led to abandon novel writing entirely. So finally, he decided to stop writing novel. He stopped writing novels, and his whole focus was on the poetry, which he loved actually loved once upon a time. Now, death and burial. When he died in 1928, Hardy's heart was buried in the churchyard of Stinford along his first wife Emma and his family. However, his ashes were interred in the prestigious Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey in London. So that's something different, right? That his heart was buried alongside his wife, first wife Emma, and family, and ashes were interred in the Westminster Abbey, right? So, this is something basic information about Hardy. Now, moving to interesting facts. So, first fact is that's a architectural legacy. Hardy was an accomplished architect before becoming a full-time writer. So he was intelligent. So he was accomplished architect as well. And he designed his own home because he worked in architectural firm, and that's why he designed his home Max Gate in Dorset in his village, right? Max Gate was the house or home. It was designed by Thomas Hardy and was even involved in relocation of a cemetery in London where he arranged headstones in a circular pattern around a tree, which is now known as Hardy tree. So he was a good architecture, and uh, he has he has made his own house. That was Max Gate, right? Another thing is that poet at heart. Actually, he that's a his call was poem only, right? He wanted to write poems, and despite his fame as a novelist, but because he got fame for Far from the Madding Crowd was the very famous novel. So then Hardy always considered himself as a poet first, and that's a novelist was the uh, second priority actually. He always wanted to write poems, and his novels were in a sense a means to an end, a way to earn a living. So that was novel was the source of earning. He wrote hundreds of poems throughout his life, and many of which are now highly regarded. So that's a number of poems he had written, and poems were also very good. Now, unfortunately, his name was Hardy was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature an incredible 25 times, but never won. So that's called luck. That's a Nobel Prize nomination. 25 times he was nominated, but could not win. Next is also very important, the origin of cliffhanger. There's a cliffhanger, right? Something is hanged here, right? So that's a same cliffhanger. While not definitely proven, Hardy is credited by some with inventing term cliffhanger in his serialized novel A Pair of Blue Eyes, also famous. This novel, A Pair of Blue Eyes, a character is left literally hanging off a cliff at the end of the chapter, leaving readers on edge until the next installment. So it was serial, it was episodic, right? So whenever, like in A Pair of Blue Eyes, character uh, for the audience had have to wait, like readers had to wait for next incident. So that's a character is Cliff, right? So uh, he's stuck somewhere, and that is why this is the literary term cliffhanger was invented by the author. Then Lost Works, Hardy's first novel, The Poor Man and the Lady. It was the first novel, right? Was rejected by publishers, and the manuscript was subsequently buried by Hardy. So he has just buried his manuscript. Unfortunately, many of his letters and notebooks were also destroyed by his second wife, Florence, after his death, leaving scholars with limited personal documents to study. So that's a second wife. She buried other papers, other letters and notebooks, right? Uh, by second wife Florence, and scholars could not read his personal document. Might be something different, something unusual. That's why his second wife Florence, she buried all the documents, notebooks, and all. So this is something little we got to know about Thomas Hardy. But yes, all in all, he was the wonderful poet, and he is famous for his works, right? The famous work, as we know, that first book novel which gave him made him famous, right? And that was the Far From the Madding Crowd, right? So that was then he had got he was acknowledged, and then finally he decided to leave the job in a architectural firm, and then full he became full time writer. But because of some controversial themes, that he again went back to poetry, was the his first love. He liked by heart, actually he liked to write poetry. And for his A Pair of Blue Eyes, for this novel, that's a character is somewhat is hanged, right? And then readers had to wait for next action, and it was episodic. So that's why uh, this literary term was coined by him, cliffhanger, right? So these were the things so we got to know about the author. Thank you so much. God bless you.